everyone, welcome to another video. Today I just have a video on some very simple masking and then a few more tips thrown in along the way. For my stamping today, I am using the Thankful and Blessed stamp set from Joy Color Stamps. Specifically, I'm using that little sunflower in the top right hand corner there. I love this stamp set. It's filled with sunflowers, and sunflowers are my favorite flower, and fall time is my favorite time of year. Even though it's freezing right now, I still love it and it's gorgeous. So I went ahead and I pulled off that little sunflower stamp and I made a few masks with it from some Inkadoo masking paper and then just quickly cut them out. I always do that off camera because it takes a little bit of time, but I promise it's well worth it once you get the masking done. Now this is some super simple masking because I'm just going to be filling the right side and bottom of this card panel. This is a craft card panel. You can make it whatever size you want. I made mine 5.5 by 3 3/4. I wanted a little bit of room on the left hand side for some pattern paper peeking out. But this is super simple masking because there is no right or wrong order to these flowers being on there. You can put whatever flowers you want in front, and if you do mess up along the way, nobody's going to notice. So this is a great one to start out with if you're a beginner with masking. Instead of something like scene making where you need the right little guy to be in front and you need certain trees to be in front and behind, and that can all get confusing. So this one, you don't need to remember any of that. Just have fun and play around with the technique. So I stamped 3 flowers. I stamped 1 on the right and then 2 on the bottom. And I just kind of turn the stamp whichever way, have a little bit more on, a little bit more off. That way it doesn't look like I'm using the same stamp over and over and over. Then I covered up my 2 on the bottom and I started stamping on the right corner, right bottom corner. I stamped that little sunflower down, and then I'm going to go ahead and stamp right in the center of the 2 that I have masked off. I am using some rich cocoa ink. This is it's just a little dewdrop ink pad. These are one of my favorites to use, especially if I'm going to be using alcohol markers to color with. I'm using a brown because I wanted to keep with kind of that tone on tone with the craft paper and the brown ink. Now I want to make sure each time that I stamp down that the right stamps are covered up with the mask. So I do a double check before I stamp each and every time. That way it doesn't end up looking like I've crossed over into another stamp, or it makes it really confusing whenever you do that and then you start to color. Then you don't know which petals go with which flower. Now for this, I actually kept it really simple with the coloring, so that wasn't an issue, but if you decide to go with more than one color on your flowers, it gets a little confusing. So once I had the bottom filled in, I started to move up the right hand side here. So I covered up my little top flower on the bottom there and the one I stamped on the right hand side at first, and I'm going to ink up my stamp again. Now each time I stamp down, like I said, I want to double check and make sure that I've got everything covered that needs to be covered. If you need to go in and make another mask, it doesn't take that long to cut them out, so I would highly suggest cutting as many masks as you need. For this, I kept mine at 2, but if you wanted to, you could cut 3. That way you know you have enough each and every time. I'm going to ink up that stamp again. I've moved my bottom mask up again. I'm going to stamp in the top right hand corner. That way I just have one that is in the forefront there as well. And then I can come in, move that mask to the one I just stamped, and stamp in between that one and the one that's covered up on the bottom. This is just going to allow me to stamp right in between each one of those, but not get my flowers mixed up. This allows that flower to look like it's behind both of those, which makes it look more like a cluster of flowers on the side of my card. I peeled off all those masks once I was happy with it, and there's a close-up look at how that looks just with a little few simple masks and just moving them around and stamping whatever I want to. Now for each one of these, like I said, I cut my coloring very, very simple. I'm using my alcohol markers. Before you do your stamping, you need to decide what coloring medium you want to use. So you use the right ink that can play well with whatever coloring medium. So I went ahead and chose my alcohol markers, which is why I used the Memento Dewdrop inks. Then I grabbed some yellows and a brown and a green, and I'm going to color in each one of these flowers and the leaves and the little centers of the flowers as well. I kept all of my sunflowers a yellow color. However, if you wanted to, you could go in with whatever color you want. You could make these different, you could make these daisies, you could make them whatever color of flower you want to. You can make them all different colors. Just make sure whenever you're using different or more than one color on this type of card that you double check whenever you're coloring in the image that you've colored in all the little petals that go along with that flower. It can start to look a little off if you get some mixed in with another flower, so just do a little double checking and take your time. I went ahead and colored in the stems with some green. And another thing to help me keep these all in order and to color this very quickly, I'm coloring in kind of sections here. So I did my right hand section, my right side section, and I'll finish that off with coloring in the little centers of the flowers. Then I went in and colored the bottom section the same way that I colored the top. Finally, I want to come into all the centers of the flower and add a little bit of texture. So I'm using my brown alcohol marker here. This is a darker one than I use for the center, and I'm adding little dots. You can use however many colors you want here. I just use one because I will come back in when this card is completely finished and add a little bit of something extra to give it some more texture and a little bit more dimension as well. I'm just going to finish that up very quickly, dotting in those little centers there, the flowers, and just go straight up and down and do some smaller, some larger. That way it doesn't look so perfect. If you don't have different colors of browns, you could use a lighter color of brown or like a tan color or even your colorless blender to put in dots. And then you could also use a black marker to fill in some of those dots as well, and that will give you a different look. Now once that was finished and I had all my dots in, it was time to start putting the card together, but I wanted to stamp the sentiment first. There's a close-up look at all the flowers colored, and here is another look at that same stamp set. It's got some great sentiments in it. I'm going to be using that Give Thanks right at the top left-hand corner, and I'm using my Misty to go ahead and stamp this in. I went ahead and lined that up, made sure it was nice and straight. I'll pick it up with the lid of my Misty, and then I'll just stamp that down with some icing on the cake ink from Catherine Pooler. You could use the Dewdrop inks. I just like these for my sentiments because they're nice and crisp and really rich in color. I'll go ahead and stamp that down. Because I'm using my Misty, I'm going to give it a double stamp as well. There's a closer look at that sentiment all stamped. It really is just a gorgeous font. I love that this is made for the Color by Face series, which is great for Bible journaling, but there are also a few just regular everyday sentiments thrown into the stamp set, so that way you can use it for your fall themed Thanksgiving, that kind of thing, those cards. Now I wanted to add a little bit of pattern paper to the side of this, so I added double-sided adhesive to the back of the pattern paper. I also added it to my panel. I popped my panel onto my pattern paper, and then I'll go ahead and pop the entire thing onto an A2 top folding card base. This is a white card base that I made myself. I'll go ahead and pop that on. I've got a little bit of white hanging off to the left hand side there. And before I do any more work to the outside, I want to go ahead and stamp the inside while I don't have anything on the outside that's got to have some dry time. So like I said, this is from the Color by Face series, so it's got some great verses on it, Bible verses. And I'm going to go ahead and stamp one of those on the inside of the card. So the outside says Give Thanks, and then on the inside it says With a Grateful Heart. Now I wanted to dress this up a little bit, so I decided to take that other cluster of like pumpkins and sunflowers that's in the stamp set. I'll do a little second generation stamping. I stamp that down once onto a scrap piece of paper, then I'll stamp it down again, and I've got a lighter ink. It looks almost like a ghost image. That way it lets the sentiment be the star, and then it kind of hides in the background. It's a great way to dress up the inside of your cards, and you don't have to have a bunch of ink pads to do it. It gives you that lighter color of ink without having a second ink pad on hand. Now I wanted to add a little bit more texture to the center of those flowers, so I grabbed my enamel accents in black tie. You could use Nuvo drops. If you don't have the enamel accents or the Nuvo drops, you could always use a little bit of acrylic paint and a little paintbrush and do it that way as well. That would give you a It wouldn't be quite as dimensional as this, but it would still be a great look. You get that nice texture and that color variation. Here's a closer look at those little dots all in the center of the sunflowers. It's just a really fun look and a little something different on your flowers as well. Now I also wanted to add some more embellishments to the outside, so I grabbed my Nuvo drops in gold. I'll have the exact colors and all of that stuff listed down in the description box. So if you have any questions about inks or colors of markers or what markers I used, those are all going to be down in the description box below, along with links so you can easily find them online. I added a few of those gold Nuvo drops just all around the front of the card, and that finished it off. I love how simple this is. It was super simple to make. Even though it has quite a bit of masking, it was very simple masking to do. That's going to do it for me today. There are going to be links on the left side of your screen you can click on if you want to see more videos from me. You can also subscribe to my channel over there. I want to thank you guys so much for watching today, and as always, happy crafting.